Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. The whole place smelled like potato salad and cheap perfume. One of those rural community centers with folding chairs, scuffed floors, and punch bowls sweating under flickering fluorescent lights. My sister's wedding reception. Everyone was full of barbecue and sentiment. I was full of wine and regret. I sat near the back with a glass of discount Chardonnay in a plastic cup, trying not to wrinkle my dress. My brother had just finished giving some dumb speech about family values and teamwork. Everyone clapped like it meant something. Then my dad stood up, raised his glass, and cleared his throat. Here we go. My beautiful daughter, he started, smiling wide. Marrying a good man, strong values, real job. I couldn't be prouder. His voice carried like a preacher's. People leaned in. And let's not forget my son. Business is booming. Bought his first house at 24. Hard work pays off, folks. The clapping picked up. I swirled the wine in my cup and didn't look up. Then he turned to me. And then there's our youngest, our little wanderer. He chuckled, took a long sip. The biggest waste of tuition we've ever paid for. Laughter exploded. Church friends, old neighbors, cousins I barely knew. They howled like it was stand-up night at the VFW. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. Dad kept going. Remember that piano recital in 9th grade? His grin widened. She got up there, all serious, all proud, and froze halfway through. Poor thing just sat there like a deer in headlights. Then she hit one key. Bong. Sounded like a dying cow. Even more laughter. My aunt clapped like she couldn't breathe. I didn't blink, didn't fidget, just stared at the condensation sliding down my cup. My face didn't move an inch, but inside, my jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. My whole childhood flashed behind my eyes like a bad slideshow. Every time he'd turn me into the joke to get a room laughing. This was just the grown-up version. I didn't say anything. Never did. My silence had been trained into me. Years of being cut off, brushed aside, told I was too sensitive. I knew the rules. Don't ruin the moment. Don't be dramatic. Don't make it worse. So I stayed still, that fake smile frozen on my face. My mom touched his arm like she wanted him to stop, but he waved her off and raised his glass again. To all our kids, he said, even the ones who still haven't figured it out. Another round of chuckles. I downed the rest of my wine and stood up. I walked straight outside that night, past the smokers, past the cousin trying to puke behind a bush, and kept walking until I hit the edge of the parking lot. I wasn't mad about just that one comment. That was just the latest punchline in a lifetime of them. Growing up, I wasn't the golden child. I was the family's comic relief. My brother Travis was the sports hero. Varsity jacket by sophomore year, state championships, full ride to Georgia Tech. My sister Melanie was the honor roll angel, perfect GPA, student council, prom queen. And me? I was the entertaining one. Not in a talented way, just in a way that gave everyone something to laugh at while the burgers were grilling. Every mistake I ever made got turned into a story. Like the science fair in 5th grade, I was actually proud of that volcano, stayed up 3 nights in a row painting it, mixing the fake lava just right. But it bubbled over early, soaked the cardboard mountain, and made this sad slurping noise before collapsing on the floor. I was crushed. But that night at dinner, my dad turned it into a joke. Her volcano went off early. Must run in the family, everyone roared. I poked at my mashed potatoes, face burning, or the time I tried out for the middle school dance team. Practiced in the garage for weeks, thought I had a shot, didn't even make the first cut. Came home fighting back tears, and the next day at church, I heard him tell Deacon Wyatt, well, she's got plenty of spirit, just not in rhythm. Big laughs. Always big laughs. It was always like that. Every time I tried something, failed, and showed even a little emotion, he'd snatch it up, polish it, and toss it out like a party trick. I stopped crying around 11. Arguing didn't help either. He'd just say I was too sensitive, or worse, making it all about me. So I learned to eat it, quietly. One Thanksgiving when I was 13, I thought I'd finally get a win. I'd built this little electric motor from a YouTube video. Wires, magnets, the whole deal. Took me 3 weeks to get it spinning right. I was proud. I brought it out during dessert, plopped it on the table next to the pumpkin pie, and flipped the switch. The tiny rotors spun like magic. I waited for someone, anyone, to be impressed. Dad glanced at it, leaned back in his chair, fork still in hand. That's nice, he said, chewing, but you're never going to be an engineer, sweetheart. Not with those grades. That was it. No questions. No, how'd you build that? No pride. Just a gut punch, delivered with that same old smile. Melanie leaned over, touched my arm, like that would help. Travis made a joke about me starting fires in the garage. I didn't say anything. I just picked up the motor and went to my room. That night, I laid on my bed with it spinning beside me, just listening. It sounded like a mosquito trapped in a jar. Pointless, maybe, but it was mine. Every time he turned one of my stumbles into a story, I filed it away. I kept track. The wrong guesses in Trivial Pursuit, the time I slipped in the baptistry, even the birthday cake I tried to make that collapsed in the middle. He turned them all into routines. I was like a sketch comedy character in his one-man show. Sometimes, in his quieter moments, he'd throw me a crumb. "You'll find your thing, honey," he'd say, always with that tone. Like I hadn't yet. Like I was still fumbling around in the dark, hoping to trip over some talent that actually stuck. I never yelled back, never told him how much it stung. But inside, I was building something a hell of a lot stronger than an electric motor. I promised myself I'd figure it out. Not for him, not for laughs, but for me. I didn't care how long it took. I'd make damn sure I did. I didn't just file away the pain, I started building something with it. By high school, Travis was already driving a lifted truck paid for by some local sponsorship deal. Melanie had early acceptance letters lining the kitchen counter like trophies. Every Sunday, people stopped my parents at church to say, "You must be so proud." No one stopped them about me, so I got up before the sun. While they were sleeping, I ran. Up and down our gravel road, knees screaming, lungs on fire. I didn't care. I wanted to feel something I chose, pain I controlled. When I wasn't running, I was reading. Not fiction, not fluff. Field manuals, engineering guides, logistics playbooks. I checked out everything I could find about military infrastructure, combat construction, routing supply chains under pressure. My school librarian didn't even ask questions anymore. She just scanned the books and looked at me like I was made of stone. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, especially not my father, because I knew exactly how that would go. He'd give that crooked grin and say something like, "Sweetheart, you couldn't even survive ROTC, let alone the real thing." Or worse, "You want to build bridges? You can't even fold laundry, right?" He wasn't joking, not really. That was his way. Wrap a knife in a smile and act surprised when it cuts. So I kept my mouth shut, studied in silence, trained in secret. I stopped waiting for permission and started working like I already had something to prove. I knew I wasn't the strongest, wasn't the smartest, but I could outlast anyone. While Melanie was being crowned valedictorian and Travis signed his employment contract with some tech startup, I was drawing circuits and memorizing field layouts. I'd sit in my bedroom with headphones on, blasting white noise so I couldn't hear the dinner conversations. Laughter from the dining room didn't bother me anymore. That part of me was already gone. They thought I was still floating, still lost. But I had a plan. Graduation day came like a funeral I didn't cry at. The whole family gathered around Melanie, fussing with her cords and snapping pictures. Dad slapped Travis on the back, proud of his boy getting hired straight out of college. My mom handed out little napkins she'd made with everyone's initials on them. Nobody asked me what I was doing next, which was perfect. That afternoon, while they popped champagne in the backyard, I slipped out the front door, drove myself to the recruiting office in Augusta, wore jeans and a t-shirt, hair tied back, no makeup, just grit. The guy behind the desk looked about my age, maybe a little older, clean cut, sharp eyes. He glanced up from the paperwork. "So, what brings you in?" I looked him dead in the face. "To prove something." He nodded like he heard that one all the time, but he didn't know the half of it, because deep down, I wasn't just there to prove I could do it. I was there to prove they'd been wrong about me since day one. Every joke, every shrug, every time they looked past me like I wasn't even in the room, it all led to that moment. He handed me the papers. I signed without hesitation. No fanfare, no audience, just me, a pen, and the first step towards something real. The next morning, I reported to the processing station with a duffel bag and no goodbyes. No send-off party. Just a cheap granola bar in my pocket and my dad's voice echoing in my head. "You couldn't even survive ROTC. Basic training made that voice louder, sharper." The drill sergeants didn't yell anything I hadn't already heard at home. Just with less fake smiling. I woke up every day before Reveille, ran harder than I had back in Georgia, and took every hit without flinching. While others cried in their bunks or whispered about quitting, I just tightened my laces and kept moving. I wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but I didn't break. Every time I got close to breaking, I heard him in my head. Sweet but scattered. Not leadership material, not built for this. And I'd dig deeper. I learned to clean my weapon faster than anyone in the platoon. Learned to shut up and listen. Learned how to lead without barking orders. I watched who panicked, who stalled, who followed without thinking. I studied weakness, not just to avoid it, but to know how to hold others up when they started to fall. By the time we graduated, I wasn't just a soldier. I was a machine. I got assigned to a forward support battalion with a vertical construction unit. My job? Build things, fix things, make sure people didn't die on the road. And when leadership noticed I didn't crack under pressure, they handed me a small team. First command. It wasn't glamorous, just a handful of engineers and convoy drivers. But to me, it was everything. Afghanistan was a different beast. The heat soaked your bones. The dust was like breathing powdered glass. Every noise could be something. Every quiet moment felt like bait. One morning, about 2 months into deployment, we were rerouting a logistics convoy through a valley north of Kandahar. Nothing unusual. Until the lead Humvee picked up chatter on the comms. Something about a delay. Something not sitting right. Then came the warning. Possible IEDs ahead. The map said that road was clear, but maps don't catch last-minute traps. We stopped. Everyone went still. The lieutenant on scene started calling for backup, but I was already scanning the terrain. Slopes, water lines, blind turns. I saw what the satellite photo missed. A narrow service path tucked behind a crumbled wall. Old irrigation access, probably. Barely wide enough, but solid ground. Follow me, I said. No hesitation. Just action. I walked the first 100 feet on foot. Eyes on the dirt, ears on the wind. Nothing tripped. No wires. No anomalies in the ground. I flagged the rest forward. We rerouted the entire convoy off the main road in under 20 minutes. 17 vehicles. No casualties. Explosives were found on the original path an hour later. That night, the guys went to the mess tent, laughing, unwinding, blasting music. I skipped the noise. Instead, I sat in my bunk, pulled out a small black notebook, and wrote 17 names. Not full bios, just last names. One line each. Those were the lives I'd kept breathing. That was enough. I didn't want applause. I didn't need a medal. What I needed, what I earned, was trust. Silence that carried weight. That unspoken look when someone followed your command, not because they had to, but because they believed you'd get them home. That was the real currency out there. Not bragging, not speeches. Just doing the job right when it counted. And in those moments, when dust clung to my sweat-soaked face and the air stank of diesel and fear, I felt more alive than I ever had sitting at any dinner table back home. I wasn't comic relief. I wasn't the screw-up. I was the reason 17 people didn't die that day. And no one, not my dad, not my siblings, not a single person back in Georgia, could ever take that from me. After that day in the valley, I didn't slow down, didn't let up. I took every assignment like it was life or death, even when it wasn't. I moved up quick. Sergeant, staff sergeant, officer candidate school. Then came the bars, lieutenant, then captain, then major. Promotions weren't just rank, they were proof. I didn't need cheers, I just needed the next challenge. The next problem no one else wanted to solve. I got known for 3 things: planning under pressure, staying calm when the walls were falling, and never passing blame. If I screwed up, it was mine. If my team screwed up, it was still mine. That's how I built trust. Quietly, relentlessly. One op stuck with me. Joint NATO mission in Poland. Classified details, tight window, live conditions. Tension was thick enough to choke on. I was leading coordination. Tight formations. Air-ground handoffs. We had about 6 hours to move equipment through a corridor that had been flagged for potential hostile interference. Junior officer, British, fresh, full of theory, tried to challenge me mid-briefing. "You sure this is the most efficient route?" he asked. Polite, but sharp. Like he expected me to flinch. I didn't blink. "If you've got a better way, say it now. If not, we're done here." He looked at me, then down at the map. Said nothing else. We executed it to the minute. No losses, no delays. By the time we hit the extraction point, his posture had changed. He found me afterward, helmet off, sweat streaking his neck. No small talk. He saluted. That was the thing about respect. It didn't need an announcement. You earned it in the dirt, not in a speech. Back home, I didn't talk about any of it. I called my parents once every few months just to check the box. Mom would ask if I was eating enough. Dad would grunt, "When you gonna find a real career?" That was always his line, like the army was just a phase I'd grow out of. I stopped trying to explain years ago. Didn't tell them when I got my first commendation. Didn't bother when I was pinned colonel. Never mailed a photo. They wouldn't have known what they were looking at anyway. The medals were in a drawer. My name was on briefing rooms most people never walked into. That was enough. I didn't need his applause anymore. I carried my pride differently now. Not loud, not for show. It lived in my silence, in the way my troops stood when I walked in a room, in the way they listened when I spoke. My pride was my weapon, my shield, and no one back home had to understand it. They just had to stay out of the way. The second I pulled off the highway into my hometown, it all felt smaller, like the buildings had shrunk just to fit the memories tighter. I parked across from the old Baptist church, engine still running, and stared at the garment bag hanging in the back seat. My uniform was inside, pressed, clean, untouched. Instead, I wore a plain navy blue dress I'd pulled off a clearance rack. No medals, no name tag, just smooth fabric and silence. Inside, everything looked the same. Same smell of furniture polish and fake flowers, same cheap carpet and folding chairs. My sister Melanie was glowing, of course. White dress, fake lashes, picture-perfect smile. The kind of southern wedding that made people forget how messy real life could be. Dad spotted me near the entrance. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, grinning like he was already 3 beers deep. "You clean up all right? Guess the army taught you to iron, huh?" I gave him a nod. That was all he was getting. He didn't miss a beat, pulled me toward a couple in their 60s I didn't recognize and said, "This is our wild child. Took the long road, but somehow ended up all right." I smiled politely, said nothing. That was his favorite setup now. Somehow ended up all right. Like I'd tripped over discipline and landed in a uniform by mistake. I wandered through the reception like a stranger at a reunion I didn't ask to attend. The church hall buzzed with people I half remembered. Old classmates, teachers, neighbors. Most hadn't seen me since high school. They still looked at me like I was late to class and forgot my homework. No one asked what I did. They just assumed I'd straightened out. I poured a glass of red wine, cheap stuff, same brand they served at Melanie's first wedding, and found a corner to stand in. I watched Melanie pose for photos with her new husband, laughing like her life had been spotless. Watched Travis chat with Uncle Bill about his second rental property. Everyone had their place, their role. I was still the one they didn't quite know what to do with. A teacher from middle school walked by and said, "So you still bouncing around? Your dad says you've been keeping busy." I just smiled and raised my glass. She nodded, already turning away. I didn't correct her, didn't explain. That was the part that hit hardest. How easy it was to erase everything I'd done. How fast a uniform in a backseat could disappear when the story had already been written for you. So I stood there, sipping wine, letting their version of me float around the room unchecked. I could have walked out right then, popped the trunk, stepped into my uniform, and shut them all up in 30 seconds flat. But I didn't. I waited. The microphone squealed a little as Dad took the stage. His tie was loose, face red, glass of sweet tea swapped out for whiskey. Everyone clapped like the king had arrived. "All right," he said, rocking on his heels. "You know I can't let a wedding go by without embarrassing a few folks." The crowd laughed, already warmed up. He started with Travis, of course. "This guy," Dad said, pointing, "still can't fix a leaky faucet but somehow owns 3 houses." Chuckles rolled through the room. "He's got charm, I'll give him that." Travis raised his glass and shrugged like a sitcom character. Then came the new husband. "Ben, welcome to the family," Dad said. "You've got taste, I'll give you that. Pretty sure you're the only man who could marry Melanie twice and still look this happy." Laughter again, big, full-bodied stuff. Ben laughed along, arm around my sister's waist. I sipped my wine, waited. I knew my cue was coming. Then his tone shifted, just slightly. That familiar smirk crept in. "And this one," he said, turning toward me, "bless her heart." People leaned forward. It was automatic. He had them hooked. She took the long road to nowhere. Laughter. No one even paused. "You remember that trip to Florida?" he said, grinning wide. "We stopped at that Waffle House just outside Tallahassee, and she disappeared for 20 minutes. Claimed she was going to the bathroom. Ended up 2 blocks down, crying in front of a used tire shop." The laughter doubled. slapping knees, shaking heads. She's got the worst sense of direction of anyone I've ever met. I swear she couldn't find her way out of a circle with a map and a compass. He sipped his drink. Maybe that's why the army kept moving her around so much. I didn't blink, didn't look away, just let him keep going. It felt like every barbecue, every reunion, every time he'd chosen humiliation over decency. Mom reached for his elbow, her fingers light, trying to rein him in. He shrugged her off like a fly. But hey, he added, raising his glass, she showed up. That counts. More laughter. Fewer this time, but still enough. I stayed still, stone. But something shifted in the air. That's when I saw him. 2 tables over, dress uniform, clean cut, stiff posture. I hadn't even noticed him before. He wasn't family, not from town. But I recognized the chest full of ribbons, and I saw his jaw tense. He stood. It was quiet at first, just the scrape of his chair, the soft clink of glass as people turned. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Wait a second, he said. Dad paused, mid-sip, confused. Heads started turning. The man looked right at me. Aren't you Colonel Harper? My heart didn't jump. My face didn't move, but I nodded once. Yes, I said, calm, clear, no drama. Whispers sparked through the crowd like static. Dad blinked. She's being modest. She dabbles in army stuff, but you know. The man didn't blink. No, sir. She commanded Task Force 4 in Kandahar. Silence, sharp and instant. She saved my life. And just like that, the whole damn room changed. The silence after his words hit like a dropped glass. I looked out across the reception hall and saw people freeze mid-bite, mid-sip, mid-laugh. Forks hovered. Conversations stalled. The air snapped to stillness. The man in uniform stood straighter now. His eyes didn't leave mine. Colonel Harper, he said again, firmer. I nodded once. Yes, I am. Dad let out this nervous little laugh, the kind he used when someone brought up politics at a cookout. She's being modest, he said, waving his drink like that would reset the room. She dabbles in army stuff, but you know. The man turned his body fully toward him, voice clear, flat. No, sir. She commanded Task Force 4 in Kandahar. He let it sit there for a second. No rush, no drama. She saved my life. It was like the floor dropped. Someone near the cake table gasped. My mom's napkin froze halfway to her mouth. Chairs creaked as people twisted to get a better look at me. Then, by the dessert table, an older man with a limp stood up slowly. You could hear the pop of his knees. His eyes locked onto mine, and without a word, he straightened his spine and gave a full salute. Another man, Vietnam hat, bolo tie, stood too. Then one more. Colonel on deck, someone said. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. My chest didn't swell. My hands didn't shake. I'd been under fire. I'd walked through sandstorms and mortar attacks. I could handle awkward silence in a church basement, but I wasn't expecting the ripple. A woman near the punch bowl whispered to her husband, "She's a colonel?" One of my high school teachers sat back like someone had kicked him in the gut. Melanie turned toward me, eyes wide. She didn't say a word. Travis actually stood halfway, like he wanted to leave, then sat again. My dad just stood there, still holding the mic, mouth half open, like he forgot what words were. I didn't move. I let the silence stretch, let them sit in it, let them hear it echo, let them feel the weight of what they'd always refused to see. The man in uniform stepped closer to me. Ma'am, he said softer now, my name is Major Ron Keeley. We served together outside Spin Boldak. When command froze up, you didn't. You rerouted that convoy and pulled 5 of us out. I never got to thank you. You just did, I said. He saluted again. I heard the clink of a wine glass being set down, the squeak of a folding chair, a cough, but no one dared speak loud. Mom stood beside Dad now, her hand hovering near his arm again. But this time, he didn't shrug her off. He just stared at me. I didn't break his gaze. The mic lowered in his hand. He didn't have a punchline left. I didn't need to say anything else. The truth was already doing the talking. The silence didn't end. It deepened. One by one, more veterans stood. A guy in a faded Marine cap, a man with prosthetic fingers, a woman in her 30s with a crew cut and a black dress. None of them spoke. They just rose and faced me, shoulders squared. People stopped eating, stopped whispering. They just watched. The same people who used to laugh when Dad called me Lost Cause or Space Cadet were now staring like they'd just woken up in a different story. Dad lowered the mic, still trying to figure out how the ground had shifted under him. His face had gone pale, less drunk, more rattled. Mom stood next to him, eyes red, one hand pressing a crumpled napkin to her cheek. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I didn't move. My spine locked straight, chin steady. I'd stood like that in uniform more times than I could count, outside briefing rooms, in front of caskets, during flag ceremonies in the desert. This time, it wasn't protocol. It was power. Let them sit in it. I let the quiet stretch until the air felt like it couldn't take another second. Then I said it. "You always called me a screw-up," I said, voice calm, flat. "But I'm the one who leads." The words didn't echo. They landed. Dad blinked like he hadn't heard me right. Like maybe it was a joke, so he tried to recover. "Well," he said, chuckling weakly, "I guess that's one way to—" No one laughed. Not one person. He looked around, desperate for backup. But they'd all turned. Melanie stepped away from the head table, bouquet still in her hand, her face frozen somewhere between shame and shock. Her heels clicked across the floor. She stopped in front of me, not looking at Dad. Just me. "We didn't know," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. That was all. Behind her, someone shifted uncomfortably. Brad Kessler, from our 10th grade geometry class. The guy who once snuck a fart app onto my phone and played it through the cafeteria speakers. His face was red now, neck blotchy. I didn't know either," he stammered. "Back then, we just—" I nodded at him too. Nothing more. I wasn't going to hand out grace like coupons. But I wasn't there for revenge, just truth. The kind that didn't need a spotlight. All I had to do was stand still and let the weight of who I'd become speak louder than he ever had. I stepped outside and took a breath. The air was thick with summer, warm and still, like even the wind was holding its tongue. The man in uniform, Major Keeley, stood beside me, hands behind his back, steady as ever. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. One by one, people started coming out. A few shook my hand. A couple nodded. Some just stood off to the side like they weren't sure if they were allowed to speak. Then the second wave came. Soldiers, dress uniforms, boots polished, ribbons lined sharp. Some I knew, some I didn't. But they knew me. They didn't say much. Just formed up. 2 lines down the front steps, facing each other. A quiet corridor of respect. No music, no cameras. Just silence and purpose. I caught the whisper from the crowd across the lot. "That's Colonel Harper?" A woman near the curb answered, "Yeah, that's her." Then, in the doorway behind me, I felt him. My father. No glass in his hand, no smile. Just standing there, mouth half open, like someone had finally turned the lights on, and he didn't know what room he was in. He didn't say a word. So I did. "I didn't need your applause," I said, loud enough for him and everyone else to hear. I earned their respect. It didn't echo. It landed. A Navy vet at the front of the line, retired, silver hair, chest full of service, stepped forward. "We follow her," he said. "That's all that matters." Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. They just waited. So I saluted. Then I stepped forward, off the church steps, into the space they made for me. My walk was calm, upright, earned. They saluted back as I passed, one by one. No orders, no stage, just history in motion. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I drove off slow, uniform still untouched in the back seat, but no longer unseen. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't proving anything. I was arriving. And this time, it was in my story, not theirs.